What's up, everyone? Hi, Abram Wealth. You're not a bot or anything. Nice game, he says at my intro when I never play games on... Good stuff, good stuff. Welcome to Norm America Show. Running a little late today. Your host, robnoerr. Hope everyone's having a fantastic day. Let me know if the audio is screwing up or anything. We should be good. No to Abram Wealth. Whether I'd like to talk to him on Discord about an exciting opportunity. No, thank you. I have enough exciting opportunities. It's election day. Did you get out and vote? I hope so. I certainly did. Even though I'm at work, I managed to find the time to get out and do so. So, having a good day here. Busy. I managed to do a Spaces the other day, but I didn't have equipment set up to be able to necessarily do a video like I normally would. So it was on Twitter, but we're going to recover most of the material I covered on that space, so no big deal. Busy because we're short-staffed here at work now, so I've been at work since Saturday. It's been difficult for me to keep up with the news, to stream or anything like that. When more people get in here, I'll discuss what's going to go on here in the next couple days. I definitely won't be streaming tomorrow. That's the only day I have off to spend with my family, so... it is what it is. I won't be streaming. But a lot going on. I'll be interested to see the polls here in Pennsylvania closed at 8. We have a big Supreme Court election coming up. It is the big thing that was on the ballot. If Republicans lose, they will lose control of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court until 2035. It's predicted to be a very close debate. You're already hearing about shenanigans. Voting machines shutting down because they're switching votes, etc., etc. So we'll see how that plays out. But I made sure to get out there and vote and contact people. I don't know that my wife was able to. She had an emergency pop up at home, so hopefully she made it out there and was able to vote. But other than that, I contacted some other people. Look at this. This guy's back. Hey, Abram Wealth. Yeah, man. We're just going to block you. Have a good one. Thanks for the spam. So, a couple things to talk about today. We have the manifesto. It was finally partially released. There's some things to talk about that I haven't heard other people talk about, so you'll get my unique spin on that. Also, Aftershock tipped me off from the Crucible. Andrew Wilson debated a gentleman named Matt Dillahunty on secular humanism versus Christian nationalism, and it was an in-person debate hosted by Modern Day Debates. Needless to say, it didn't go so hot. In fact, they didn't even make it to the debate opening statements. Andrew Wilson gave his opening statement after Matt Dillahunty, and Matt decided to peace out. He didn't want to talk about what Andrew wanted to talk about. So we'll talk a little about that, maybe show some clips from that, and then anything else that people wanted to talk about, or wherever my brain takes me. So we'll give people a chance to get in here. I know I'm starting a little late, and I didn't advertise the stream or anything, so we'll give people an opportunity. Until then, I will just... Oh, there's my boy Casimir. What's up, man? Voted for one Republican judge, one Republican councilman, and also for Tom Woods, Hans Herman Hoppe, Dave Smith, Stephen Kinsella, Ayn Rand, Liquid Zulu, and other write-ins. Excellent. You know, I knew a person once. It was just like some stupid town election. Town council or something like that. And I knew a guy that him and like 4 of his buddy wrote his own name in, and he won. And so they called him like a week later and was like, yeah, you won this election for town council. And he was like, oh, I don't want it. I refuse to accept it. So they just left the position vacant. So it can happen. Maybe we'll get Hans Herman Hoppe will win an election. Who knows? Depending on what he was written in there for by Casimir. My polling place, I think I didn't see. So they went back to, for a while there, they were doing computers. This was just fill in the bubble. And then you put it into a machine and it went from there. Is anyone on Twitch? If someone could type on Twitch, I just want to make sure that I'm streaming there. I would appreciate it. If you're watching on Twitch, just type something in the chat. A simple hi or you're fat. There we go. What is your IP? Thank you. And didn't even insult me. You can't beat that. So, we should have a good stream here tonight. Gubernatorial election in Kentucky, I saw that. Yeah, obviously, here in Pennsylvania, voting ended at 8, so you're not going to start to see kind of results till, 10, 11. I would anticipate we will not see results from the important elections here in Pennsylvania until tomorrow, because it's predicted to be pretty tight. What's it like to be famous? It's great. This is a true story. I love my brother. Sometimes my brother's JoJo Geeker. Sometimes I'll raid him on Twitch. Sometimes you'll see him in my chat. Okay, so no one in my family really follows my channel. My brothers do. My two brothers. That's about it. But my mom and dad, they don't know. They don't care. And they're probably better for it. So my mom was like this is 2 months ago or a month and a half ago. She's like, so you got this big opportunity. You're going to be making a bunch of money now. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, oh, your brother called and said that your name got mentioned on this guy's show. Tim Pool, I think was his name. And so now you're going to be making all this money and you're going to be famous. I was like, oh no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way, Mom. But that's nice. It's nice. My mom's impressed. And to be honest, that's all I care about. As long as my mom's impressed, everyone else could think I'm a terrible person. It's shit at debate and shit at content. That would be fine. It's funny. And God bless my brother, too. Who thought that I was going to get... Needless to say, after several emails to Tim Pool, messaging all the people that put his show together, I was not contacted. Instead, they were real big on doing a bunch of videos about Ron DeSantis' boots. So, yeah, great. Good stuff. What's up, John Jacob? Yeah, McClineberger. What can you do? I'm not going to harass people. I'll reach out a couple times. I put some super chats in. No go. Okay, time to move on. So, that's what we do. So, but I still love life. So, oh, what's up, John? Rolling from Twitch. Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'll reach out to that Ian guy. I've sent him private messages on Twitter. He hasn't responded to any of them. I messaged him publicly on Twitter. He hasn't responded. Am I debating anyone tonight, Pisco or anyone? Not that I know of. I don't have anything lined up. If some dumbass wants to call in and get wrecked, I'm game. Especially Pisco. Pisco's not going to like debating me anymore. Because we're going to talk about fire alarms. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Pisco's belief that Bowman pulled a fire alarm to open a door. That's what we're going to talk about. Every single time I talk to him. I don't give a shit if I'm invited to the biggest panel in the world. That's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to let everybody knows who we're talking to before he opines on any subject. Because he's so bad faith that everyone deserves to know that's where he's at. By the way, again, Jamaal Bowman, according to the affidavit, lied to police. Said he didn't think that pulling the alarm, he didn't intend the alarm to go off when he pulled it. That's a blatant lie. There's no two ways about it. Any charges for obstruction? Any of the lefties that said, oh, there's not a double standard. Like when Papadopoulos lied to investigators, that was reason to charge him. Yeah, absolutely. When Flynn lied, that was reason to charge. But not Jamaal Bowman, right? That's different. They won't be calling for him. I wonder what's different. I wonder why they aren't calling for that. And of course, Pisco will just say, well, maybe they are. There could be a second investigation. Let's give it 30, 40 years to make sure that there's not a separate investigation. All right, well, there could be a separate, perhaps Merrick Garland's investigating. It could be a separate investigation. Yeah, okay. Yeah, don't leave. Despite all that and Pisco being a schmuck, don't harass him or anything like that. When you think about it, we are the election results. That's too deep for me, man. I'm a simple man. I know about all that philosophy shit. I saw that, John. I saw your discussion with him. Yep. We should wait for it. What do you think would happen, John, if the grand jury's never called? Do you think peace will go, well, that's outrageous. There wasn't a second investigation. They let him go. Do you think that's what would happen? What's the debate tomorrow? Who's debating tomorrow? Oh, the Republicans. I didn't give a shit because Trump's not going to be there, to be quite honest with you. All the debates are worthless. Now, having said that, I think Trump should go. There's two ways to look at it. There's politics, what you would like to see done. And then there's politics, the game, right? Politics, what I would like to see done. I'd like to see Trump and DeSantis and a handful of those other people, Vivek, debate 10 times on serious issues with good moderators. That's what I would like. I want to vote for the person I think best represents me. And I'd love to see them hash it out to help me decide. But I understand that's not good. The moderators are all going to be shit. The RNC's garbage. They hate their own voters. They make sure that the people that moderate don't even talk about the topics that their voters are concerned about. They leave lefty garbage shitheads moderate the debates all the time. And I know Trump sees that he doesn't have anything to gain in the game of politics by participating. And he's probably right. He probably is right. At this point, his lead is so big, all he has to do is go out there to rallies and be on the bully pulpit, and he'll probably maintain his position. If he internally thinks that he's starting to slip, and someone like Nikki Haley or DeSantis is taking over, then maybe he debates. But until then, he doesn't really have an incentive to. Conversely, if you're not winning, you absolutely want to debate. When I ran for Congress, my biggest downside was no one knew who I was. I was going up against people that had been career politicians for 20 years, or that were incredibly wealthy and had businesses in the area and things like that. I didn't have any of that. So my plan was to get my face and voice out there as much as possible. I would have debated every night. I personally called every single conferee that was voting. Not all answered, probably 2/3 of them answered. Some of them I talked to for 45, 50 minutes, and they still weren't going to vote for me because they'd already made up their mind. But I understood that as the underdog, the only chance I had was getting my name out there as much as possible. Zygmunt answered, that's right. Zygmunt actually, so Zygmunt, I know me and Zygmunt have had some playful banter back and forth about balloons here on the channel, but Zygmunt, one of the things I thought was amazing, when I ran for office, for me, as someone who's running for office, I think my job is to be as transparent as possible as to what I would do if I'm elected. That's my job. The voter's job is to do some level of research into the candidates and pick the person they think best represents what they want. And oftentimes what you see is in general elections, people just vote because someone told them to vote or because they have a letter beside their name or something. And that's not always wrong. If you're voting for a Democrat, you're doing bad, right? So I'm not besmirching that necessarily. But in this primary, it's all Republicans. And Zygmunt actually sent out questionnaires. He was the only person of the 220 or so conferees that actually reached out to every single candidate, I think, that he could find and sent questionnaires out, which I was more than excited to fill out, like the night I got it and return it to him. So, yeah, I thought that it was good on his part. The conferee process was a circus, yeah. I also agree with that, Zygmunt. It seemed because Marino got out. A little inside baseball here. The reason there was a special election was this guy Tom Marino won the election in 2018. He didn't want to drop out for health reasons during the election, or else the Democrat basically would have won by default. So he stuck around, he wins, and then he says, oh, I have health problems. Then he resigns, which led to a special election. And so in a special election, you don't have a primary. Basically, Republicans and Democrats, through their own means, could choose who they want to put on the ballot. So I'm not even quite sure. I think the Democrats just had one dude running. The Republicans had this conferee process. So instead of everyone having an election day, like where everyone could go vote in the primary, instead what happened was they had a conferee process. So basically what that meant was in the district, each county got to put up, based on how many votes they had for Republicans in the actual election, they got to put up a certain number of conferees. I think the number was like 212 or 220. And then those conferees would vote. You would have a big conferee day where everyone would come together and you'd vote. And basically you voted until you kicked off the lower end people until someone got more than 50% of the vote. It was a fucking joke. I'm not going to really talk about what a joke the process was. But yeah, I mean, Tom Marino dropped out for health reasons and then immediately became a lobbyist. And now he seems to be running for office again. So, I don't know. Seemed like, I don't know. I don't know if it's because Pennsylvania is a Commonwealth. My understanding is that's not... See, a primary is different. There's no law or whatever. General election is obviously governed by the state. And the reason for that is because that's going to decide for the whole state or the whole Commonwealth here in Pennsylvania who will be representing people, whether it be a governor, whether it be Supreme Court, whatever, in the state of Pennsylvania. The primary process is each political party putting up their person. And if a political party has crazy, messed up rules, the state doesn't really govern that as much. Yeah, we're going to talk about Andrew Wilson's debate. I talked about it the other day, so we're going to talk about that probably in the second half of the show. So anyways, we've stalled enough. There's enough people watching now. So it's time to get into the topics that I wanted to talk about. Did you see the trans manifesto? 3 pages of it leaked. Did you see that? Did you see that a pro-Palestinian protester beat a pro-Israel protester's head in with like a megaphone or something and killed him? Did you see that? You see all that? Well, it's a lot of left-wing violence, right? But you wouldn't know it if you watch CNN or ABC Nightly News or read the New York Times. Wouldn't know it, would you? Wouldn't know. It's time to call it for what it is. Every single institution in this country. Well, okay, that's a bit hyperbolic. 95% of the institutions that shape our cultural narrative are dominated by establishment voices. And right now, the establishment has decided that by paying lip service to the left and to lefties, it helps them entrench power. Because of that, all of their media coverage, their studies that they put out, the data, none of it should be trusted. None of it. When you start to go through the data on the small events, like, it's actually amazing when you think about it. At no time in human history have we had as much information at our fingertips. At no time have we been as connected as we are now. Like, the mere fact that me, some schlub, making $20 an hour, working 80, 90 hours a week, in rural Pennsylvania, living paycheck to paycheck, can communicate to people all over the world with relative ease. It's quite amazing. The fact that we basically have libraries that's bigger than the Library of Alexandria on this, it's mind-blowing. The amount of information at our fingertips, it's incredible. And yet, one of the problems is with so much information, how do you curate into getting the important stuff? How do you know what's true? And so what happens is, still with all this information, we rely on other people to curate for us. We rely on official people. So you could see with your eyes, for example, the summer of 2020, riot after riot after riot occurring. People dying, stores being looted, lit on fire. Violent rioters attacking police, attacking other people, etc. You could see it. You could see it in real time. And yet, seemingly, that doesn't really appear on the FBI crime statistics for political extremism. How? I remember this study that was going around from this organization, CISA, that was being cited all over the mainstream media, and I believe CISA collaborates with our intel agencies and police forces. CISA stood for the Center for Strategic Intelligence Survey or something like that. I think that was the acronym. And I was in a debate and someone was like, look at this! How much domestic terrorism is right-wingers? What's up, Ninja Gundam? Look at it! So I looked and it defined domestic terrorism as non-state actors using violence or threats to achieve political ends. And I was like, well, shit, that's Black Lives Matter and Antifa if I've ever heard it. Using violence and intimidation to achieve political ends. Yep. And so I looked at their little chart, and yet, weirdly enough, none of those riots that I saw, 70-something days in a row in Portland, the Chaz Zone, riots in Philadelphia, in my state, there were small riots in Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Milwaukee, D.C., and that's just a handful. There were hundreds of these. They didn't show up. When we see a left-winger shoot Steve Scalise, there's an incident, so you're like, okay, let's see that one. When I check their list, it'll be on there. You know how the FBI did categorize that they consider it left-wing terrorism? A left-winger inspired by Democrats and Bernie Sanders went out and tried to kill Republicans on a ball field because he was upset that they were going to overturn Obamacare. Clear example of left-wing violence. Is that what they called it? No, they called it suicide by cop. That's what they called it. So when you see Merrick Garland go out there today and say, the biggest threat to this country domestically right now are terrorist organizations that are racially identitarian like white supremacists. That's what he says. And you'll debate these people and they'll say, look at this study. Look at this CISA study. But when you look at the specifics, you're like, okay, well, here's the handful that I remember. I remember this left-wing assault. Does that show up? Oh, it doesn't show up. Well, what about the Steve Scalise shooting? Oh, it doesn't show up. What about Antifa, the Chaz Zone? Oh, it doesn't show up. You think they're being honest with the rest of those statistics? You just happen to know the 2 or 3 that they didn't put on, but all the other ones they got right? Now you're starting to see, why is it if there's a right-wing mass shooting terrorist that has a manifesto, within a few days we get to see it? But when it's a left-winger, what are we on? How many months has it been? 6, 7, 8? No, we can't see it. Then it gets released, parts of it, and it's as bad as you thought it would be, using racial slurs for white people, saying that they wanted to attack children intentionally. Exactly what you thought it would have been. And what's the response? Because remember, when this happened, right? Boy, oh boy, the Democratic media and the Democratic politicians of the Biden administration, they jumped in gear. My God, a Christian school, a bunch of white kids were killed. That's terrible. We need to help. We need to stand up against hate, against the trans community. Wait a minute, it was a member of the trans community that shot people. Now, let's not be transphobic. Now, if it's a right-winger that shoots people, do they say, we need to speak up from hatred against right-wingers? Do they say that? Of course not. Of course not. Which is how I was able to predict, just 2 days ago on Twitter, when this guy, what happened was there was an older guy, I think he was 70, that was at a Palestine-Israel protest here in the States, and he got beat, and he died as a result of his injuries. And so it was like, oh boy, here we go. Left-winger, pro-Palestinian guy killed a pro-Israel guy. And I was like, you know what that means? Time for Democrats to come out tomorrow and condemn Islamophobia. Which is exactly what happened. Elizabeth Warren was out there today. Oh, we got to stand against Islamophobia. Really? And I've been talking about this a while. Remember when Ilhan Omar... Was it Ilhan Omar? No, it was... Yeah, it was Ilhan Omar, I think. That said it's all about the... Maybe it was Rashida Tlaib. Whatever. One of the squad people. All about the Benjamins criticizing AIPAC. And I thought erroneously they considered that to be anti-Semitic. I didn't think so. It could be, but I didn't think it was proof of it. You absolutely should be allowed to criticize Israel lobbying efforts, and that doesn't make you an anti-Semite. I also criticized that, and I'm not an anti-Semite. And yet, once it was determined, okay, the Democrats need to do something about this alleged anti-Semitic comment, when you read the statement that they put out, the resolution that they all voted for, it was basically like, we condemn hatred against Muslims and against Jews. And we condemn hatred from white people. And we condemn hatred from Christians. Weird. Wasn't talking about condemning hatred from Muslims, though. or LGBT people. Just white Christians. That's who you could bag on. They're responsible for everything. And so, if someone gets killed by a member of a marginalized group, instead of saying, wow, members of this marginalized group are being radicalized, instead they say, it's time to speak up in defense of the marginalized group. Like clockwork, you knew that's what would happen. Right, they condemn both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. That's right. In fact, they condemned all forms of bigotry, they said. And they went and specifically listed bigotry against Muslims, and bigotry against Jewish people, and bigotry against black people, and bigotry against Hispanics, and bigotry against LGBT people. Notice what groups were missing? Oh, no bigotry against Christian, no bigotry against white people, and then they started listing examples. Hey, Defund Media. Great name. Thank you for the stream, or the raid. Then when they listed the offenders, it was all white groups. Thank you so much, Defund Media. We're talking about the trans manifesto and how this pro-Israel protester was just killed by a pro-Palestinian protester, and the Democrats' responses say, we have to condemn Islamophobia. What's it matter that we're mostly a white and mostly Christian country? So it's okay? It's okay to use violence against white people? It's okay to use violence against Christians? It's okay to be bigoted against those groups? Nonsensical. So here's what we know. We have 3 pages that came out. Now, let me steelman the opposition. Do these 3 pages that we have from this manifesto of the trans shooter in Nashville, does it tell the whole story? Probably not. I don't know how many pages this manifesto supposedly was, but I know we're only seeing part of it. So are there things that we're not seeing that maybe paint a more complicated picture? Probably. Probably true. Who gives a shit? Because we're not using robnoerr standard. We're not using any objective standard. The standard is, if you could take racist or bigoted lines out of some shooter's manifesto, then you could label that whole group as harmful and blame that group for radicalizing that person. So let's say hypothetically, you're not talking about the Ilhan Omar stuff, right? You're not. Like, again, think of how nonsensical this is. Do you see how hard, like, our resident lefty Keyline Platypus tries? Do you see? You can see with your own eyes what happens, right? You got this dude that's threatening to rape and kill Jewish people in Cornell. What do? Oh, well, we have to condemn Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. Right. Because they're trying to patchwork through their cultural Marxist shit that being Jewish is being oppressed and being Muslim is being oppressed. If you're white or you're Christian, fuck off. They're not going to condemn hate against that. Good luck. Good luck finding that. They won't even keep statistics on that. Am I arguing that the Buffalo shooters was cherry-picked? That's not the one I'm specifically talking about. We'll talk about the ones I'm saying are cherry-picked. No problem, Code. So let's say, hypothetically, this trans shooter said, I want to shoot Christian kids. They used more colorful language than that. White kids. But you get the picture. But let's say in the pages that aren't released, they have contradictory statements. They say, I hate Democrats. I hate Bernie Sanders. And that radicalized me because these Democrats, they're not, you know. Maybe it just shows fucking insanity. You know, the Martians told me to do it. Whatever. And if that's the case, inevitably when it's released, the left and the Democrats will say, see, this was just a deranged person. The idea that they could have been radicalized by LGBT rhetoric, you know, people saying that there's a genocide and all of this stuff. Because remember, this happened in Nashville where they were arguing about laws, about exactly the types of materials that would be allowed to taught in school and things like that. Now, bullshit, Meta. That's absolute bullshit. So Meta says this, and you notice how this only goes one way. The attack by the trans person was a hate crime, and they should have listed it as such. They were worried about an increase in hate crimes against trans people, which is fairly reasonable. So in other words, it's okay for them to gaslight. Are they ever worried when a right-winger goes out and does something? There were plenty of attacks against Trump supporters. There were attacks, physical attacks. There were attacks getting people fired and shit like that just for being Trump supporters. And yet, if a Trump supporter does something, no one says, well, we're worried about attacks against Trump people, so we're not going to release the manifesto. We won't do that because we're worried. Bullshit. And this is the game that you'll see played by these fuckheads on the left, right? This is how they want to gaslight you into accepting the double standard and accepting the fact that we're approaching an authoritarian system where the left could do whatever they want. They could have summers of riots, firebomb police cars, attack the White House with Molotov cocktails, injure national security guards, and they'll laugh and they'll say, oh, Trump's a bunker bitch. He had to be moved. Aha! And when Tom Cotton says, geez, maybe it's time to deploy the National Guard to deal with this, the New York Times writers will all say, no, we're going to leave. We'll resign. You can't do that. And all the Democrats in the media are cool with that. That's a cool standard. And then when there's right-wing violence, they're like, deploy the National Guard! Lock everyone up! It doesn't matter if they are violent or not! It's an insurrection! Holy shit! And then you'll get fuckheads like this person on my channel going, well, the reason there's a double standard is, like, if there's a trans shooter, even if it's a hate crime, they can't talk about it because people could be mean to trans people in response. If it's a right-winger, you call that shit out. If it's a Christian shooter, you fucking right. You call them out. You get the FBI up there. I wanted that manifesto on every fucking television. Get it front page of the New York Times. But it's a trans shooter, so we have to be worried about blowback. It's a Muslim shooter. We have to be worried about blowback. We can't talk about what actually happened there. Fuck you. So tired of these sacks of shit. So tired of it. So, back to what I was saying. Let's say that there are a more complicated picture that we'll see. Well, two things. First, why didn't we see this earlier? There's no reason, unless there's suspect of an accomplice or something like that the average person wouldn't be able to see the manifesto. If there was information that spoke to a potential accomplice in this manifesto, that could have been censored out, and we could have seen the rest of it. And yet they showed us nothing. Why? It's not because they were worried about hatred against the trans community. It's because they understood that they told everyone that rhetoric from Donald Trump and rhetoric from right-wingers and rhetoric from Ben Shapiro and rhetoric from Dave Rubin and rhetoric from Joe Rogan, they'd been saying that all of these people were inciting violence and encouraging people to go out and do violent acts. And so anytime there was a shooter, they would look at their YouTube playlist or they would look at who they followed on Twitter and go, look at that! Look at that! They followed Ben Shapiro! Oh boy, that's violence. That's what someone like Vosh does. Vosh says that it's stochastic terrorism. When we talk about how bad the left is and then someone might listen to you and then they go out and commit acts of violence, then you're responsible for inciting it as an act of stochastic terrorism. Even if you didn't directly tell them to go commit violence, the mere fact that you talked about how much you dislike the other side or something is what leads to that. Now, it's ironic, coming from Vosh, who literally tells his supporters to go out and shoot people like Patriot Prayer people. But he wouldn't consider that stochastic terrorism when Vosh says there's a trans genocide. And shouldn't we have stopped the Nazis before they took power? And you need to arm yourself. And you should be shooting at Patriot Prayer people out windows. That's the world I want to see. And then we have a trans shooter go shoot people. Does Vosh say, oh, I've committed stochastic terrorism? Of course not. Do I believe stochastic terrorism? The way the term's used, no. Is it possible that someone could listen to you and be radicalized even if it's not your intention? That's possible. Should you hold someone accountable for that? No, I don't believe so. If that's the case, literally, then we would have to say that you can't talk about climate change, as I'll get to in a minute. Because someone could say, geez, humans, because of fossil fuel use, are leading to the end of the world, which will kill all species, so I'm radicalized now, so I'll go harm humans to try to stop them. Does that mean you're not allowed to talk about climate change? Of course not. Stupid. Remember the Dallas shooter? Remember this? So there was this shooter that shot up a bunch of Hispanic people like at a Walmart. And his manifesto, what little I could remember of it, cited the Christchurch shooters manifesto. Basically paid homage to him. Christchurch was in New Zealand. I remember that. I looked at that case very thoroughly. Tried to be as reasonable as possible. That manifesto read like the Joker wrote it. It literally read like he was trying to blame as many different groups as possible. So if you were anyone, if you're a right-winger, you'd be able to look at that manifesto and go, see, he was a lefty. And if you're a left-winger, you'd be able to look and say, see, he was a right-winger. That's how it was written. He even cites like video games. Like I think he cited like Spyro the Dragon and shit. I mean, it was clearly a demented person, but the manifesto was clearly a troll. But this was also cited by this Nashville shooter. Now, what was focused on by the media was this was a right-wing racist killer. Both of them. That's what they said. Right? Look at their racial beliefs that are in their manifestos. Okay. Both of those manifestos also talked about climate change and overpopulation. Now, those are left-wing talking points. Anyone remember those killers being called left-wing killers? Anyone remember people that talk about climate change and overpopulation being blamed for radicalizing these people? Why was that? Why didn't the national narrative become the full picture? That they talked about some views that traditionally right-wingers might talk about, but they also talked about views that left-wingers. They started, all of a sudden the conversation was great replacement theory. We need to ban anyone online that talks about great replacement theory. Because this dude went out and he shot a bunch of Hispanic people because he thought they were immigrants and things like he didn't like it. We can't talk about that. Did they say we have to ban conversations of overpopulation or climate change? No! They didn't even mention it. This is because the establishment that controls the narrative right now is paying lip service to the left. And they control the narrative expertly. They're so good at it. The right is so fucking far behind. Let me give you an example. Imagine if a bunch of right-wingers would have taken Molotov cocktails tomorrow and attack the White House, and they harm a dozen Secret Service agents, and they burn one of the Secret Service agents' guard stations down. What do you think the national news would be? Imagine that Joe Biden then gets rushed out of the White House into a bunker. There'll be committees that Democrats will hold. The FBI will launch one of the largest investigations into history. They will blame any right-winger, Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis. They'll demand looking into everyone's emails and private communications to see if there was any planning of this and any communication went up. You know it would be one of the biggest stories of the year. Everyone knows it. But when the left did it on May 30th, 2020, no one gave a shit. The narrative was, ha ha, Trump had to move. You know what the narrative was? The next day when Trump went across to the church that was lit on fire, his Bible was upside down. Ha 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 ha. And the right didn't capitalize. You had a handful of people like me like, what the fuck is this? These riots are getting out of control. That was it. Even I didn't go say, this is an insurrection. I didn't say that shit. Then as soon as January 6th happened, bam, insurrection. Oh my God, AOC feared for her life. That Michael Fanone police officer, how many times is he going to get in front of the Capitol and cry? I thought I was going to die. No lethal weapon. There weren't Molotov cocktails deployed, unlike May 30th, where there was actual lethal weapons deployed. So now when the shoe's on the other foot, okay, pick and choose, Christchurch shooter, Dallas shooter, pick and choose what you want and say, this represents the right, and we're going to condemn right-wing people that talked about things that are similar to this. They're responsible for that violence. And maybe we need to censor disinformation like this because it's radicalizing people. This is part and parcel to who the Democratic Party are. We just have more information that came out just today that Jim Jordan was putting out there on Twitter. More information about the government working with private institutions to collude with social media to censor people going into the 2020 election. Constantly. Remember they wanted their disinformation czar? That was their whole job was going to be to censor disinformation. Never mind the disinformation that's parroted by the mainstream media, the Democratic Party, and establishment politicians, which is more harmful than anything some rando does on Twitter. Yeah, the Christchurch shooter was an environmentalist. He was a climate change believer. Yeah. So fuck those climate change people. Right, Meta? Right? We should talk about that. Climate change. Jeez, these climate change people. Radicalizing, right? Oh, that's different. They're allowed to talk about what they want. You are being unreasonable in your defense of censoring the trans Nashville shooter because they didn't want blowback on the trans community. Bullshit. If you're going to put manifestos out there and then politicians are going to blame people and call for their censorship that talk about points that maybe were mentioned in that manifesto, then that's the standard. You don't get to say, well, only if it's right-wing people. If it's left-wing people, we're worried about blowback. Doesn't matter if it was a manifesto, if it was a list of no... Define manifesto, fuckhead. Here we go. Okay, define manifesto. Define manifesto. So here's where we are. So the difference is when it's a right-wing person, like the Buffalo shooter or something like that, those are manifestos, so they should be released. But what happened with the trans shooter, which we could see, specifically said, I'm going to shoot up this school. I almost got caught in 2020. Here's my reasonings for shooting up the school. That's just a private diary. That's different. That shouldn't be released. Do you see how far... But he's being reasonable. This lefty's being... I'm not even being that unreasonable. I'm saying manifestos should be released, but this wasn't a manifesto. It was a private diary that happened to give intentions. Here's the first thing that comes up when I type in definition of manifesto. Manifesto, a public declaration of principles, policies, or intentions, especially of a political nature. So I guess you could quibble with the idea of public, but certainly this was political points with intentions of what they were going to do. Is there any doubt, other than the two stupid fuckhead lefties, which, by the way, you'll notice that I'm getting less and less patience with fuckheads like this meta guy and Keelan. Fuck them. I don't care. Make fun of them. Laugh at them. They're horrible shitheads. I hope they get to live in the utopia that they want. Hopefully they're in a city and they can defund the police and, Keelan could have his wet dream of getting rid of all prisons and hopefully Keelan gets to live in that society. I'm rooting for you, man. Good luck. Really am. Good luck to you, man. But now you see, right? So now we're on to semantics. It was a hate crime, I agree, but it was a private diary. Other than those two fuckheads, does anyone here, have any doubt whatsoever that if this was a white supremacist that went into a black school and started shooting them and wrote notes down saying what he was going to do and what his motivation was, that we would have heard about it within a week? Does anyone have any doubt of that? It would have been almost immediate. The media would have been all over it. They would have been researching. There would have been leaks. And there would have even had to have been leaks because it would have only been a short amount of time before the local police would have released this. There would have been national pressure. There would have been people that were decrying racism and things like that, demanding to know who did this person listen to? What were they looking at online? We all know that's the case. But we have to pretend with fuckhead lefties like that. No. Just like the fuckhead lefties that are like, maybe pulling the fire alarm was to open the door and he didn't intend to. Fuck these people. Fuck them. Fuck them. No, fuck you. Why didn't families sue previously to be able to prevent these things? Why didn't courts intervene and say that other diaries and things like that weren't allowed to be released? Why did the police not just release it voluntarily on their own? So what you're telling me is the police attempted to release... the police attempted to release the non-manifesto. They were going to release it. The national media was going to look into it. But then the court stepped in because family members spoke up and said, you can't release it. That's your argument? So, just to show you how bad faith this fucking Meta guy is, you ready? Let's start right out of the gate. Remember, it wasn't a manifesto, so here's from October 17th, right? Tennessee Courts of Appeals heard oral testimony Monday over whether the writings left behind by Nashville school shooter who killed 3 kids and 3 adults at the Christian school should be released to the public. Early in their investigation, shooting at Covenant School, police announced they recovered writings by the suspect they described as a manifesto. That can't be. This fuckhead lefty on my channel said it's not a manifesto. So, Meta, surely the police are erroneous. You haven't seen these writings. Police have called it a manifesto, but Meta knows it's not a manifesto. No, says Meta. Meta, a fucking lefty that's making excuses for hate crimes that are carried out by the left and their writings not being released, says, this is different. This wasn't a manifesto. So I'd like for Meta to explain to us how he knows that it's not a manifesto. Did you have access to these writings? Did you see the writings in ways that other people haven't? Do you have more information than the police that have themselves have described it as a manifesto? Go ahead. Go ahead, Meta. Do you see? Now, if you read the article, what it says is, although there are people that were victims' families that don't want it released, there are some that do want it released. And basically a judge stepped in and said you can't release it, and now there are police organizations from outside that are saying that there is public utility to release it, and the reason that the local police have given for not releasing the information is because they say that they're looking for potential accomplices, which is bullshit. We all know it. Oh, now Meta says, so you believe the police are always correct? There could be no such thing as discrimination. No, police could be wrong. You wanted to quibble about semantics. You wanted to make a semantic argument to try to explain why one manifesto would be released and not another. And you made a declarative statement. This isn't a manifesto, it's a private diary, right? Now, you haven't given any reason to justify that sort of scenario, why it wouldn't be considered a manifesto, or even if we took your semantic change, why that would mean that this shouldn't be released, but a manifesto should be released. The reason you did this is because you're trying to make excuses for the double standard, right? So I thought, oh, maybe this is an argument police made, that it is a private diary. But once police, who are the only ones that have written the whole thing, have said it's a manifesto, I want you to tell me, seeing as how you made this bad faith argument in the first place, where you got your information that they're actually wrong, that it's not a manifesto, and in actuality it's just a private diary. Please, tell me where you got your information. Absolutely right, the police could be wrong, so tell me where you got your information. What were you reading? Now, they were certainly sympathizing with the shooter. You looked at the Crowder release, it was barely legible. Right, so you looked at the same thing that the rest of us looked at, which was 3 pages. There's far more that hasn't been released, but you're declarative that it's not a manifesto. If anything, the parts that were released read like a manifesto. Anyways, done dealing with this guy. You keep chatting amongst yourself. Key Lime's earned himself as a bad-faith shithead lefty to be a member of the community. You can go fuck yourself. So that's the play. That's what's going to go on, right? If the full thing gets released and there's other things that could be considered right-wing beliefs, like if they make a racial slur against black people, they'll say, see, it wasn't some radicalized trans shooter that was radicalized by the trans agenda to go shoot Christian kids, white Christian kids. It wasn't that. It's complicated. But they don't give that same benefit of the doubt to any other shooter. At all. How many more times do police have motivation to target white people or target Christians that somehow don't make it up on the left-wing violence scale? Thanks, Sigmund. I don't give a shit about these lefties anymore. I just don't. Here's another story to pivot a little. I saw Tom Nichols was writing. I think he writes for the Washington Post, if I'm not mistaken. They put this article out that was like, Trump's team's compiling a list of people that they're going to go after and prosecute that have attacked him. You know, personal beefs that he's going to go after. My God, it'd be the end of the country. Right. If Trump does what Biden does, that'd be terrible. Right? Wouldn't that be terrible? Don't promise me a good time, Tom Nichols. Good. I hope Trump does that. I hope he wins. He won't. But I hope he wins. He won't. But if he did win, I hope that he would go after people like that. He won't. Because, unfortunately, it will never stop until it's targeted at the very people that are cheering it on. Everybody that cheered Steve Bannon going to jail for contempt because as a pundit/journalist, they wanted to look at his information because somehow he was perhaps connected to this grand insurrection conspiracy on January 6th. Well, turnabout's fair play. Everybody that was okay with James O'Keefe's house being raided because he supposedly had Ashley Biden's diary, turnabout's fair play. You got documents critical of Trump? Fuck you. Get raided. Sorry. Them's the rules. Prosecutors going to start running on, we promised to lock up Nancy Pelosi. We promised to lock up Joe Biden. That's what, if you elect me, that's what we're going to do. That's what Letitia James did in New York. That's cool in the gang. No problem, right? It won't happen because Republicans are fucking gutless, but that's what should happen. It should. All of the people like Pisco that said, all the January 6 people, I haven't seen one charge that I thought was wrong. All of them are correct. Really? Even the people that were nonviolent. Yep, they're all correct. Okay. Maybe people like Pisco at a rally and some people do something bad and then he gets wrapped up in that and has his life destroyed. That's what they deserve. Sorry. Not my rules. I'll defend you if I think it's worth it in the time. Yeah, there you go, Zygmunt. Then that's worth a vote. I'm just so tired of these people. You have, like, one of my favorite... Here, let's see if I can find this. It's one of my favorite clips of all time. It should be a verb. Ari Melbering. Remember when Ari Melber on MSNBC's The Beat, when even before Elon bought Twitter, he had a lot of concerns. Let's listen to this. Let's hear what Ari Melber had to say. His concern. Can you imagine?
You own all of Twitter or Facebook or what have you. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't even have to be transparent. You could secretly ban one party's candidate or all of its candidates, all of its nominees, or you could just secretly turn down the reach of their stuff and turn up the reach of something else, and the rest of us might not even find out about it till after the election. Elon Musk says this is all to help people because he is just a free speech, philosophically clear, open-minded thinker.
Let's hear that again. My God, can you imagine if this would happen?
All of Twitter or Facebook or what have you.
Okay.
You don't have to explain yourself. You don't even have to be transparent. You could secretly ban one party's candidate.
Yeah, like Donald Trump. You can get rid of Donald Trump. You could communicate with the FBI and with all these other organizations to ban people you don't like CISA. Yeah, that happened, Ari. Where were you? Huh? What else could he do?
Or all of its candidates.
Oh, no.
All of its nominees. Or you could just secretly turn down the reach of their stuff and turn up the reach of something else.
Oh, no! You mean like how the current administration, how they censored people on COVID and on election security, on a litany of other issues, and they shadow banned them and they demonetized them and they promoted people that were more in favor of the Democrats? You mean like the status quo, Ari? Is that what you mean?
And the rest of us might not even find out about it till after the election.
Oh, you mean like happened in 2020? When social media companies almost all collaborated together to ban America's oldest newspaper that was telling an accurate story about the corruption of the Biden family? And then we didn't find out about it until after the election? And then even when we did find out about it, people like Ari Melber said that's good. It's no big deal that government's working with social media to censor. You mean like the status quo? That's what you mean. You see, it's not that Ari Melber's unaware. He knows. They all know. They know what happened. They're okay with it because they're the good guys in their head. You're evil. The people that were censored are all evil. They're on the bad side. Donald Trump's a Nazi and he's Hitler and he's going to kill us all in World War III, even though that's what Biden's doing, leading us toward that way. So it's okay. It's okay to censor him and his followers, and that's all good. It's all good. But oh my God, imagine if the other side came in and did that to us. That would be bad. That's unconscionable. That would be against the Constitution. We can't have that. Same bullshit here. Well, if Trump gets in office, can you imagine if Trump tried to prosecute Joe Biden? No. What if Trump, consider this. All right, let's say Trump wins in 2024. And then the 2028 election's coming around. And it's Don Jr.'s running as a Republican for president. And he's running against a Democrat. Let's say he's running against Gavin Newsom. Imagine if Trump weaponizes his DOJ to charge Gavin Newsom with crimes. No! That would be election interference. You can't just charge a candidate like that. What? And he's so ham-fisted, he would have 5-6 cases. No! That's what he would do? You mean like what's happening now? What if Trump weaponized the FBI to get FISA warrants to spy on his opponents? No! That would be horrible. It's transparent. They don't even hide it. You could go through dozens upon dozens of examples. I'm tired of it. That's why my approach today is maybe Key Lime and this meta guy are getting the brunt of this. But I'm so fucking tired of it. What am I supposed... Well, actually, I believe that the process is being weaponized right now. So if we start with sort of these FISA warrants and we can see the unlawful warrants... and if we see the Twitter files, we actually saw it said... So now my response is... Good. I hope it happens to you. Good. How many times am I going to be right? Hey, lockdowns will be devastating for the physical, emotional, psychological, and economic health of this country. We should reject those in the strongest possible terms. No, Rob. 15 days to slow the spread. 15 days to slow the spread. What do you want, Grandma to die? Oh, my God, Rob. And now those people are like, oh, man, you can't blame Biden. You can't, it's, the economy's as good as it can be. We didn't know what we didn't know. We tried our best. Hey, defund the police. Yeah, Vita, I didn't watch that debate. I really do like Sean from actual justice warrior. I actually like him a lot. Never interacted with him, but I enjoy watching his videos. I did not see that debate with him in Destiny yet, though I do intend on watching it. But yeah, I think you can see from the debate I had with Destiny over a year ago on the same topic, where I just crushed him on Biden versus Trump. Now we have Ukraine. How's that going to go? Well, it's going to go exactly as I told you it would go. That the United States that was funding this didn't give a shit about the people of Ukraine at all. They saw them as expendable tools, and so they would fund them right up until the point where it was no longer necessary to be able to do what they wanted to do there in Ukraine. And then, just like Afghanistan, they would leave them high and dry. There would be death, destruction. The people that would be negatively affected the most would be the people of Ukraine. And it looks like that's exactly what's going to happen. And now what you'll see is you'll see the people like Dylan Burns, just like when I debated Kevin Castley and we talked about Afghanistan. I said, okay, we were there for 20 years. We spent over $1 trillion in munitions and weapons and actual money and stuff. Over $1 trillion. Estimates vary, but it was around there. And what do we have to show for it? Well, the Taliban's stronger than ever. Things are worse than ever for the people of Afghanistan after 20 years. So, does someone who cheered for that, like Kevin Castley, does he say, yeah, I guess you're right, we were lied to, this is a terrible situation? No, he says, the problem is we didn't do more for longer. We should have had 100,000 troops there for 40 years. And that'll be exactly what Dylan Burns ends up saying when it comes to the Ukraine situation. Once it's shown as a failure, as it will be, he'll say, the problem is we should have done more, faster, longer. They never say, oh shit. Same with the COVID lockdown people. Very few say that. You'll have that guy like on Bill Maher last week that'll say, hey, we tried our best. It's time to forgive everyone. I was wrong. Time to forgive everyone. Very few people say, I was wrong. That's very rare. And then that's worthless if you're to say, I was wrong, but hey, what do you expect? You know, it's time to move on. That's nothing. That's not an apology. You say, I was wrong, and I should be held accountable for being wrong. And these are the people that were right. Now, if you were wrong, and you weren't an asshole about it, fine. But how many can you say about that about COVID? I mean, these people wanted you fucking locked up if you were in the public square without a mask. Leave your wife out of it, Goger. By the way, did you say on that chat the other day that you were working out? Bullshit. I don't believe it. You apologize if it's warranted. Hey now, I'm big boned. So, for example, if you were for the Iraq war, like Tucker Carlson was, and then he's like, yeah, it was a huge mistake. Absolutely, people are right to criticize me for that. But if he said, I was wrong about Iraq, but I was just doing what I was told, and I did the best I could, so it's time to forgive and move on. Fuck you. That's not an apology. If you browbeat people and told them that they shouldn't be allowed to say what they're saying in the public space because they wanted grandma to die, and then it turns out you were wrong, fuck off. The least you could do is sincerely apologize. Not just for being wrong, but for how you acted to the people that were right. And you should ask what you could do to build back trust. You don't say it's time to move on. It's time to move on. A legitimate apology can be something that is powerful. But like the apologies you're talking about, it's like if you say something and then it offends the handicapped Malaysian community, right? And you come out and you're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, they'll just keep on you. Because it wasn't something that needed to be apologized for in the first place. Ogre, I accept your apology. Next time, fat dumb fuck. I found that admitting when you're wrong is one of the most effective things you could do to build trust. All right. I'll probably go to 10 here. I wanted to show the clips from Andrew Wilson's debate. Now, I did a spaces on this, so I know Ogre's not probably going to want to hear this again. I also don't quite know if this... I'm hoping none of this runs afoul of TOS. It's currently on YouTube, so I think we'll be all right.
During the debate,
Why is it so low?
is we're actually going to do a before and after poll. Cool.
Well, I'd say the one that has
All right, so the debate we're going to look at, let me give a little background information on this, of what's about to what you're about to watch. I was offered to actually attend this. So Sean, actual Justice Warrior, debated Destiny. Andrew Wilson offered to take me along to participate in these debates. This was, I believe, in Texas. It was in-person debates that were hosted by Modern Day Debates. Unfortunately, I can't get off to fly to Texas in 2 weeks' notice. It just couldn't happen. But Andrew went down. I would not have been debating religion or anything. It would have been politics I was debating. Anyways, Andrew goes down there, and he's debating this guy, Matt Dillahunty. I don't know Dillahunty other than I think he's like someone who's been in the debate sphere that's debated people like Jordan Peterson. I don't know if he's atheist or he's just anti-Christian or anti-theist or agnostic. I don't know. Secular humanist is what he calls himself. The panel is about Christian ethics versus secular human ethics. I don't know specifically more than that what it was about, but that's what this debate's going to be. I was skipping through the formalities. James from Modern Day Debates is like, raise your hand if you are more of a secular humanist, raise your hand if you're more of a Christian nationalist. It seems that the in-person crowd is more secular humanist than Christian. Anyways, that's sort of the lead into the debate. What I find interesting about this debate isn't necessarily the conversation of Christians versus seculars. We could talk about that. What I find interesting is what happens. And that is Matt Dillahunty storms out of this debate after the opening statements. That's, to me, the biggest issue here, because to me, it exemplifies so much of what you see on the left, particularly in these online debate spaces, but also in college campuses and throughout your life, where the left has to control the entire terms of a discussion, or else they'll refuse to engage. They'll deplatform you. They'll walk away. And I find that particularly egregious in an event like this, where apparently there were speaking fees paid to people. I believe people had to pay tickets, a price to get in person to watch this. And even if that's not the case, people took time out of their life to go to an in-person event, probably took off work, probably go to hotels. And so for someone to just walk away and not participate when this was advertised, I find to be particularly egregious and baby-like behavior. I mentioned this on Twitter. Matt Dillahunty, who I've never interacted with before, actually then blocked me on Twitter. Now, other thing, I'm going to run basically with very limited commentary the opening statements. I'll put it on like time and a half speed of Matt Dillahunty and Andrew Wilson. As soon as the opening statements are done, Dillahunty basically walks away, and then I'll end it there. I'm not going to play the entire video. What you're going to miss after that is the audience clutching their pearls. We can't believe what Andrew Wilson just did. We can't believe it. So that's what you're going to see and what you won't see. Another thing, full disclosure, although I know Andrew Wilson and I consider myself a Christian, albeit a bad one, I have actually argued against Christian nationalism with Andrew Wilson at least 2 or 3 times, plus another time on the Crucible, and I do not agree with him that we should have, a Christian nationalist in the sense that we should scrap our Constitution and instead have a Christian, document to be our new Constitution, basically follow Eastern Orthodox Christianity for the roadmap for all of our laws. I do believe that Christianity is a good background to give our laws, but I also, as someone who has a libertarian bent that thinks that the government should be as small as possible, and they shouldn't be getting involved in things like your love life and things like that. So just because, homosexuality is a sin doesn't mean that it should be illegal in this country. So I'm not predisposed to hating Matt Dillahunty's arguments. I'm probably somewhere in between, what Dillahunty's going to say and what Andrew says. That's where I would be. So don't think that my interpretation of what happens is just because it's like, well, I agree with Andrew Wilson. I've debated him many times. So here we go. Let's watch.
Of humanity in this life, while Christianity. Thanks so much, James, and thanks, Andrew, for being here, and all of you for showing up. Humanism has as its focus the betterment of humanity in this life,
Let's speed
while
it up.
Christianity has as its focus adherence to a God and the disposition of souls in an afterlife. Our best efforts in this life are, according to the Bible, like filthy rag. Our best attempts at righteousness and justice are portrayed as vile and disgusting when compared to a bumbling God constantly failing to get his creation to love and respect him, while also prescribing the death penalty for nearly everything: adultery, blasphemy, breaking the Sabbath, disobedient children, witchcraft, worshiping another God, not being a virgin on your wedding night. Which is better for society? Well, I'd say the one that has human society as its focus and isn't so intent on killing humans for not buying into a specific doctrine. Heaven and hell, if they were to exist, aren't human societies. What a God thinks is unknown and irrelevant. There's never been a secular humanist nation, either in a governmental form, which I'm not advocating for, or in a primary philosophical view of the majority of the population.
Okay, so it's an interesting point there. So what I'm listening for, when I listen to these debates, I try to hear people, but also process, if I was arguing the other side, what would I say? On both sides, that's what I would do. That's an interesting position there, right? Now you can see the topic there is, you can see on the computer screen, Christianity versus secular humanism, which has best ethical foundation. It's kind of broad. And what's kind of, he says he doesn't want a government that runs through secular humanism. Okay. Well, we don't have a Christian national government, and the way he explains secular humanism coming up here, I don't know why he would say he doesn't want a government, because basically he just says secular humanism is just wanting to do what's right here on earth for the people here. Well, if that's what I believed it was, why wouldn't I want a government that ran through that? It's interesting. So let's hear him out, though.
Which means we have to look at the ideals between these two positions. Secular humanism has been around for 90 years. In 1933, the first secular humanist manifesto was published. It identified humanism as a religion with 15 points. It was updated 40 years later in 1973 with a lot more information. And then it was incredibly shortened in 2003. In addition to the manifestos, there are organizations like the Council for Secular Humanism, American Humanists, etc. In the first version of the manifesto, it's presented as a religious view where it acknowledges there's no supernatural guarantee of human value. We advocate a heightened sense of personal life and a cooperative effort to promote social well-being. The goal of...
Okay, so we advocate cooperative effort to promote social well-being. Okay.
Humanism is a free and universal society in which people voluntarily and intelligently cooperate for the common good.
People voluntarily and cooperatively work together for the common good. Now, one of the criticisms I'll have is, how does that stand apart from, like, say, a litany of other philosophical positions? Like, that's what Christians would say as well. Maybe not a Christian nationalist. They would say it shouldn't be voluntary. But a Christian would say, yes, we want to ethically work together for the common good. So, like, what does that mean? Like, what is the framework? How do you define common good? What's your code of laws? Are you just a complete anarcho-society where everything's voluntary? If you are advocating for some sort of state, is it no longer secular humanism?
In the manifesto version 2, 40 years later, this includes a lot more information. Short versions, they begin by saying those who sign this disclaim that they are setting forth a binding credo. This statement reaches for a vision in time that needs direction. We affirm a set of common principles that can serve as a basis for united action. This isn't a to-do list or a thou shalt or thou shalt not list. We're fine with religion's inspiration, but
okay, they don't have commandments. It's just sort of inspiration, a to-do list. Okay.
we're opposed to dogma and authoritarian views that place anything above human needs. Religions don't pass the test of scientific evidence. The promises of immortal salvation or eternal damnation are illusory and harmful.
Okay, so he mentioned science here. So thank you, Old Gamer Mike. So it seems as if what he said... Now picture you're Andrew Wilson. You're sitting here listening to this. It's like, okay, well, what has he said? Well, Christianity's fake. They don't have scientific proof for sort of the afterlife or for their God. And we're advocating for a system where people voluntarily work together for the common good. And apparently that's based on science. So things that you could prove objectively in the real world. So if I'm Andrew... Because, like... Now, maybe Andrew read these manifestos himself. I don't know. I haven't. So if I'm in this debate, I'm listening to this guy explain his worldview, and then I'm going to have a debate about it. So that's where I'm just telling you where I'm at right now, sort of based. It's like someone said in the chat, it's incredibly vague. Like, I don't know what he's really saying.
Ethics and moral values stem from human experience, and situational ethics stem from the human need and human interest.
Okay, so ethics stem from human experience and human need. But what does that mean? Like, the problem with that sort of worldview, because this is the debate, right? Let's not bury the lead. The debate between any sort of religion and any sort of secularism when it comes to sort of moral principles, the secular people are going to say, you can't prove that your God exists, and you can't prove that your religion is the correct religion. Ultimately, you will rely on articles of faith. You'll say, but I just have faith. But you can't scientifically prove it, right? The counter to that argument is going to be, but you can't articulate where your moral foundation comes from. If you just say things like the common good and the human experience, well, what does that mean? How do we then determine whether or not something is allowed or not? Like abortion. I could say that as a human need from human experience, abortion is bad, and it's bad for society. You could say, no, it's good. So how do we solve these differences? Because ultimately, it seems that the problem is that it's going to fluctuate based on the individual and what they want at the time. So they'll say, well, this is within my moral code because they don't have a list of commandments. Now, the counter argument could be, but Christians do that too. Christian like robnoerr says, well, I think gay marriage should be legal. So he's picking and choosing. Andrew would say, no, I'm Eastern Orthodox. We don't do that. But that's the debate. So I'm trying to listen to right now. That's what I would expect out of this debate. You know? So let's see how it goes.
Reason and intelligence are the most effective instruments we possess. We are not advocating for the use of scientific intelligence independent of or in opposition to emotion, for we believe in the cultivation of feeling and love.
Okay, so it's not just science, but it's also love and emotion. What does that mean? I mean, honestly, could someone tell, if you're on his side, you're against sort of Christian ethics or something like that, can anyone articulate to me what this means? It just seems to be about, well, it's about science and what's best for society, but it's not just science, it's also about love. And we all work together volunteer. What does any of this mean? Okay, what if my love, like, take that argument there. Let's say someone says, oh, my emotions are, I'm really attached to my horse, and so I would like to marry my horse. And someone would say, but we could give you a bunch of scientific or objective reasons why that's bad. Yeah, but love. And secular humanism takes all of this into account. Again, I'm not seeing something stable. It just seems like basically what he's saying is, you know how we should go through the world? We should try to make everyone happy and leave everyone have as much freedom as they want and leave them to live the life that they want, but also not harming other people. Well, no shit. Right? That's so vague, though. How does that help us when we're talking about this specific situation? You know, should abortion be legal? Should you get an abortion, even if it's not a matter of legality? So it just, I don't know. It's like there's no meat in the bone here.
Individuals are precious and their dignity is affirmed. This is important. Us, human beings, affirming the value of individuals and human beings is more powerful than a God affirming it, and it's infinitely more powerful than a human claiming a God affirms this, which is all we appear to have. The third version of the manifesto, in a nutshell, is so short. Whether God exists or not, we have problems to solve. We have to do this without appeals to supernatural entities or intervention. We must utilize the best methods at our disposal. Reason and science seem to be the primary ones to assess reality and reach conclusions.
Okay, now he says the third says reason and science. Okay. That fair. And so if I could steelman his position, I think his position is this. Look, I'm not talking about on a hyper-specific issue or anything, but the real problem I'm isolating with Christian ethics or something like that is it is derived from something they can't prove, that some man in the sky tells them this is the way it should be. That should not be how we get where we're going. If you get to abortion bad because of scientific reasons, because of objective reasons that you could prove that don't have to do with a man in the clouds, so be it. But if your reasoning is because the man in the clouds told me, that's not sufficient. You have to be able to prove why in the... So that's... And then, obviously, Andrew's counter to that's going to be, but where do you derive... Like, you can't just say reason in science, because that could mean anything, right? Reason in science is one thing. It might have to do with practical application of what we do on the ground in a particular situation, but that doesn't give us a code of ethics or morality, right? So, anyways... For the record, I'm not very impressed with his opening speech here, necessarily, but it is just an opening speech, and perhaps he would go on to clarify all of these questions that I have. That's very possible. But he runs out like a baby, so we don't get that opportunity. Anyways, so far so good.
Conclusion. Justice, fairness, equality, and autonomy are the primary goals. This life, not a hypothetical.
Justice, fairness, equality, autonomy. Okay?
Afterlife is what we're trying to improve. So what happens when religions control societies and governments, either legitimate or illegitimate? Well, conflicts with other societies and other governments may not have any reason to diplomatic solution. You need only look to God.
It's a little odd, too, because he previously said that he's not asking for secular humanist government. But now he's going to criticize Christians in government. So it seems a little odd there, but okay. So here he goes.
Awesome. But that's Islam and Judaism. Here we have Christianity as a primary and Christian nationalism. Under secular humanism, you get to be a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, gay, straight, socialist, capitalist. You just don't get to impose those necessarily on others through acts.
Okay, so you be a Christian, but you don't get to impose it on other people.
The fiat.
Through acts of fiat. In other words, through the government forcing it upon people. Okay. Fair enough.
Not necessarily true with the religions in charge of the government. Mike Johnson's the new Speaker of the House in the United States. He's homophobic as all get out. He's argued to criminalize homosexuality. Homosexualities, by the way, are U.S. citizens with specific rights that he wants to take away. Moreover, he advocates for gay conversion therapy, which is unscientific and torturous, because he thinks he can help them pray the gay away, and the gay can be eliminated. He's not anti-gay. He just wants them to cease to exist as gay. They get to keep being human beings. He thinks there's no right to sodomy. Privacy laws don't protect everything, and he thinks that what sort of sex you have, it should be his to regulate. Sodomy, by the way, is anal or oral copulation, which I have it on good authority heterosexual folks engage in as well. 2022, he presented what was called the Don't Say Gay bill, outlawing any discussion of gender identity, sexual orientation.
I mean, it's a bad example if the Don't Say Gay bill is the one in Florida that he's talking about. It was mischaracterized, but I digress.
Or related subjects, which was incredibly problematic, because he ignored what the experts have to say about age-appropriate content and how critical it is, especially for kids under 10, which was his target, to have correct language in order to better report on and about sexual abuse. His policy, if it had been implemented, would have made it more traumatic for kids and more difficult for them to out their abusers and easier for abusers to get away with it. Happily, it failed. In 2015, he blamed abortions and the breakup of the nuclear family for school shootings. He also says the teaching of evolution is to blame for mass shootings because we've taught a whole generation, a couple generations now, of Americans that there's no right or wrong, that it's about survival of the fittest. And if you evolve from a primordial slime, what is that life of any sacred value? He wants student-led prayer back in school. So, Speaker, are you okay with Islamic prayers, satanic prayers, or just particular Christian prayer? He's opposed to the separation of religion and government, sometimes called the separation of church and state. He thinks that the founders only wanted to protect the church from the state and didn't want to protect the state from the church, citing the notorious lying pseudo-historian David Barton to support this view. He definitely seeks to impose his views on others. Now, some of you are saying, hang on, he's the Speaker of the House, he's not the Speaker of Christianity, or that's not my type of Christianity. Great. But what is your type? What's your type of Christianity like? Because there's a lot of them. How is it better? And how can we make sure that we get your better version than the one that Mike Johnson wants? He thinks his version's correct, so do you. Countless denominations without consensus. He's already got more power than my opponent has right now. So I don't know Andrew at all. I don't know what version of Christianity he's advocating for. I didn't bother to look him up. We literally just met, said hello as I sat down here. Is his version of Christianity better? I really hope so, because it'd be hard to get a whole lot worse. But they point to the same book. They point to the same Savior, the same history. Liberal and moderate Christians provide legitimacy and cover to hide the fundamentalists and to allow them to engage in Christian nationalism. Secular humanism allows you to be a Christian right up until you try to oppose it on others, and then you get to keep being a Christian. You just don't get to practice it in the way where you're imposing it on others. You can pray, you go to church, you can tithe, you can worship, gather, share, discuss, convert, vote based on your values. You can vote against your own best interest. I see people doing all the time. You can teach your kids your values under secular humanism. The foundational principles of secular humanism solve conflicts with data, debate, and discussion instead of coercion, conversion, or conquest.
Now, that line right there, I want you to remember. Let's go back
No
here.
secular humanist stat under secular humanism. The foundational principles of secular humanism solve conflicts with data, debate, and discussion.
They solve conflict with data, debate, and discussion. That's going to be very ironic when this dude fucking runs away here in a couple minutes. Now, just to clarify, what he did here was he's like, here's a bunch of bad shit that Mike Johnson did. And maybe that's not your type of Christianity, but your type of Christianity leads to fundamentalists like this. So what he has done is he has taken views that are expressed by an individual that's not Andrew Wilson, and he has said, look at these views. I don't know Andrew's views, but people that advocate for Christian ethics or Christian nationalism run cover for arguments like this, which is bad. All, by the way, which I find completely inbounds in a discussion of should we prefer Christianity or secular humanism. Seems to be very reasonable. Now, his argument's going to be the reason he runs from this debate is when Andrew Wilson's like, well, the secular humanists lead to all kinds of goofy shit on the trans issue. And he says, I'm not talking about that. That's not the topic. Was Mike Johnson the topic? Was gay conversion therapy the topic? Was gay marriage the topic? Of course not. But those are conversations that fall under the umbrella of the topic that go to speaking towards which side we should prefer, which is what the topic's about. Let's leave him finish.
Instead of coercion, conversion, or conquest. There is no secular humanist sect and no denomination of secular humanists that's ever required someone to believe something that is not empirically verifiable, that's ever ordered the death of another person, that's ever ordered or acted to act or destroy property of any person or government, that has ever overthrown a democracy to impose a secular humanist regime, that's ever been connected with terrorist cells and activities, that's ever denied freedom of speech or expression, that's ever called for the deaths of people for criticizing secular humanism or any religious view, that has ever advocated for or inspired suicide bombers or terrorist attacks. Those things are simply not consistent in any way with the core values of secular humanism. There is no threat to Christians, Jews, Muslims, Scientologists from secular humanism. There might be from scientific skepticism and rationality if you're not able to actually demonstrate the truth of your claim. But life, freedom, and an equitable relationship are the foundation of secular humanism. There is no list of thou shalt not or thou shalts, because we recognize that nearly every attempt at such a list fails at some point as we learn more about our world and about getting better at understanding the world better, about doing better, and being better in this life.
Right, that's a really important admission there, too. Again, this isn't going to get hashed out in this debate. But he says, there is no list of do's or do nots. Because we learn more about life every day, and so it's fluctuating. That'll get to the heart of this debate. Because Andrew will say, there are fundamental truths. Like children can't engage in intercourse. It is always immoral. But if you say, no, we can't say that. We can't say there are objective truths. Or rape is bad. It's always bad. Dillahunty, it seems to say there, we can't say that. We can't say that because we might learn more. Right? So that, again, this comes to, that's the philosophical disagreement that you're going to have with these positions. But what I want you to take from this right now is, for the purposes, did you see how much he talked about Mike Johnson? Did you see how much he talked about Christian, how this could lead to bad policies that Christians have done? Also, I find it ironic, he said at the beginning, there has never been a secular humanist government. Then he lists a bunch of bad shit that's occurred in the world, right? And said, we didn't do that, that was religious folks. So you could do that. You could say, well, here's a bunch of bad shit. You also could do this. You could say, look at the growths that we've made as humans. Look at the growths that the United States has made and the West has made. These are based on Christian values. So yeah, you could just paint one picture and say, look at all the bad shit. But the truth is, the world's way better now than it was pre-Christianity. And we've had governments that were ran by Christians or people inspired by Christians or using the foundational documents represented by Christianity. You know, it's funny. I've had very similar debates about capitalism. People say, look at all this bad shit that's happened under capitalism. And it's like, yeah, but what about all the good shit? You leave that out?
The goal of humanism is a free and universal society in which people voluntarily and intelligently cooperate for the common good. If you have an objection to that, or a better goal, what is it?
All right, thank you.
Voluntarily and intelligently cooperate for the common good. If you have an objection to that, or a better goal, what is it?
Right, and I mean, but what is the common good? Again, that's just saying nothing. Anyways, not to belabor the point, let's get to Andrew.
All right, thank you so much for your introductory statement. We're going to hand it over to Andrew Wilson for 10 minutes, so thank you for being here, Andrew, and the floor is yours.
You're welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrew Wilson. I am the host of the one and only Crucible, the fastest growing debate channel on the internet, James. Just in case you didn't know. Appreciate that very much. Appreciate everybody being here. All of you are way too stodgy in this room. Very low energy. Just want to let all of you know that.
I actually like this. Andrew realizes that the bulk of the people in attendance are going to be against his position, and he is trying to win a debate and being authentic, but he's also being a little bit of a showman, right? Which is like, hey, get a little excited here, you know. Now, I do think that Andrew repeats himself a little at the beginning here, but it gets better.
Ladies and gentlemen of all pronouns, the Z's, the Zers, the hims, and hers, I would like to thank you for tuning in today for this exciting in-person conference on modern-day debate. My name is Andrew Wilson. There's a few ways this debate could go. The topic is Christian ethics versus secular humanism, which has a better foundation. The funny thing is, I already won that topic because, as Matt explained to Jay Dyer, he has no justification under the skeptical belief structure to give an accounting for any meta-ethical presupposition he may have. He just kind of grants himself stuff. He grants himself logic, he grants himself reason, he grants himself an entire worldview, even though he's using an unjustified starting position for it.
It's kind of, he jumped right into it based on a previous debate, which I have no knowledge of, but again, this is the fundamental disagreement that Christians are going to make against a secular humanist, which is, but you don't have a starting point. You can't say this is right and this is wrong, right? You have this amorphous, we should work together. It should be for the human good, but what does that mean, right? Because why are discussions of morality important? Because you need a code when you go through life, right? You're walking down the street, you see a wallet, right? In the wallet, you pick it up, there's $190 in it. But it also has an ID, and you can see the address of the person whose wallet is. Do you give the wallet back with the money or not? You have to have a code that says, okay, this is what's right and this is what's wrong, right? If your code is, well, in each individual situation, I would look and say what's best for humanity, whatever, then there's nothing stable to look at, right? Human nature is that you will adjust that to benefit yourself. Now, you could agree, right, that Christians might have the same problem, that Christians, right, can, turn the other cheek, Jesus stuff, but then all of a sudden they're arguing with someone. And that's a fair criticism. But at least there is something stable that you could look at that says this is right and this is wrong. Matt admitted we don't have a list of do's and do nots. So that's what Andrew's saying there. But again, not very important.
So I'm not honestly all that interested in doing the God not real dough debate because one, it's boring, and two, it's also really boring. It goes like this. I don't see enough evidence and remain unconvinced there's a God. Then I say, but you use a theistic worldview of justification like there is a God to grant yourself logic and everything else. So instead of that, I'm just going to grant Matt's entire worldview. 2/3 or more of this entire planet are all operating inside of a shared delusion that they were created by a sky daddy who loves him some slavery and murderousness. He thinks it's funny to kind of cosmically with people. That's his deal, kind of his whole thing. That's Matt's worldview. So now Matt's right, and the question becomes, should we let them to continue to believe in this nonsensical Stone Age madness, or do we stop them from engaging in it? My contention is, even if God isn't real at all, that people acting as though he is still superior to whatever nonsensical egalitarian worldview Matt can come up with. See, Matt?
Right. Now, this is an effective strategy. It's something I advocate for a lot, which is being able to concede as many of your opponent's arguments as possible and still arguing that you would win the debate. And so Andrew's like, I don't even have to, this is, if the debate plays out, this is basically, I think, what Andrew will do. He'll say, operating under a Christian ethics set, even if Jesus isn't real and God isn't real, still leads for policies that are better for individuals in the world, in the secular humanist view, than if we reject those principles, if we reject Christianity. So it doesn't matter if God's real or not. We look at, okay, Christians say do this. They have a list of commandments. They have a code of morality. And let's say that the person that prescribed that, it never existed. God never existed to tell them that. But is it still better to live under these set of these principles? So it's an effective strategy.
Also just acts as though the things he believes are true. He believes, and therefore acts as though logic is real, math is real. Everything is real based on his presuppositional belief that they are real. You see, human flourishing, the cornerstone of Matt's ideology and that of secular humanism, is totally meaningless. Flourishing by whose metric? From my perspective, for instance, attempting to lie to people who claim men can be women isn't human flourishing.
Right. Andrew makes the good point. He says, Matt makes this amorphous, vague, we're all here for reason and to work together voluntarily and to flourish, to do good for humanity. Who gets to determine what's good? What if there's a disagreement? How do we resolve it? And Andrew talks about a specific issue. Now, when your opponent is saying, I get to truth through things like science and reason, and you could find something that they believe that is non-scientific and not reasonable, then it becomes germane to the topic to say, look, this guy claims to be for science and reason through his worldview, but we can see as a secular humanist how he quickly throws that out. Now, maybe Matt will say, no, I could argue through science and reasons why I believe what I do on trans issues. I'm not quite certain what Matt believes on trans issues, but it's not out of bounds for Andrew to bring it up, because there are certainly people that are secular humanists that believe all kinds of crazy shit on the trans issues. And if Dillahunty's allowed to bring up Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, and the things he believes, even if he doesn't know if Andrew believes that or not, why would it be out of bounds for Andrew to do the same?
From Matt's perspective, it is. Why? Why should the collective of humanity lie and say men can get pregnant? Why should they say that men can have periods? Things which are categorically and obviously false. That preserving homosexuality in society is good for human flourishing, even though they are reproductive dead ends. And that Western society and egalitarianism is superior to those evil theist society, even though the Western nations can't even reproduce their own populations, but instead have to replace their population with foreigners from those theist nations that can reproduce.
This is a good argument. So Andrew's argument is going to be, okay, if it's about human flourishing, the bare minimum is humans need to exist. And if these more secular societies can't even reproduce enough people in order to make their society continue to flourish, and they have to bring people in from the more religious societies, then we shouldn't say that the secular societies were better for human flourishing. It's a reasonable argument. You might disagree. And here's the point. We're not arguing necessarily who's winning the debate. And again, I'll stress at this point, when it comes to certain issues like gay marriage and things like that, I'm on Dillahunty's side. What I'm saying right here is, because we know what's going to happen, Dillahunty's going to storm out. And look at his face. You can tell he's already irate. He's going to storm out after this. What has Andrew said up until this point that isn't on point of this debate? Nothing. He's saying, okay, here's my world. We'll grant your worldview of what's best for human flourishing. My principles that derive from Christianity are your secular humanist principles. Here are things that you or people that are more secular believe, and this is why I think it's not leading to flourishing. I think this is completely in bounds.
Let's start with a basic societal question recently asked of the West, who has now embraced a scientific and non-theistic approach to governing. Super basic question every kindergartner knows. If you don't believe me, go watch Kindergarten Cop. The question posed to the Western nation is, can a man be a woman? All right? To the question of if a man can be a woman, they say the answer is yes. And the way we will decree they can be a woman is by simply saying that woman now means male. Problem solved. Thank you, secular humanists. Thank you so much. Nope, not kidding. Why, you ask, would people be this over-the-top stupid? Well, it's simple. The good is the good, man. We have to do what's good for human society and human flourishing. And if you don't call these deranged lunatics something they obviously aren't, they might self-terminate. So in order to avoid that, we need to make everybody on planet Earth lie to them.
Okay. Now, James, the moderator, that's right there the line that James says is over the line. That people that believe biological men could be women are deranged lunatics. James says that's over the line. When Dillahunty was talking about the insanity of people that believe in Christianity leading to murder and shit like that, somehow that's not over the line. If anything, you could quibble with Andrew's statement about self-harming. You could say that's over the line, but let's listen to it again.
Good, man. We have to do what's good for human society and human flourishing. And if you don't call these deranged lunatics something they obviously aren't, they might self-terminate. So in order to avoid that, we need to make everybody on planet Earth lie to them.
You have to go along with the delusion or they might self-terminate. Now, you might say that that's callous, but I don't think it's out of bounds reason to storm out. And it's actually, although it's said in sort of a confrontational and callous tone, again, I don't have a problem with that tone. It's actually an interesting argument that's worth having. If you truly believe something is true, but you're told you can't say that because if you do, that person will harm themselves, should we as a society say then, oh, okay, then we'll go along with the lie? So take trans issues out of it, you know. If I'm obese, which I am, and I say, no, actually I'm too thin, I need to gain weight. And Ogre here is going to be like, no, man, you're a fat fuck. You're not too thin. Don't gain weight. You're going to hurt yourself. What are you doing? And then Steve McFeed says, oh, Ogre, you can't say that. It might hurt Rob's feelings and he might harm himself. So does everyone have to call me thin? No, probably not. Again, you might say that his tone was a little callous, but does anyone in their right mind think that the fact that he said lunatic or made this argument is reason to storm out of the debate? Of course not. And someone in here earlier said they agree with Dillahunty's position. What has Andrew said at this point? And you can already tell Dillahunty, this is it. He's already out.
This is human flourishing. Just redefine shit, pretend it's true. How laughably absurd this worldview is. Matt will often say, I remain unconvinced. Well, Matt, I'm also going to use your standard. I need for you to 100% convince me beyond a shadow of a doubt that males can have babies. What's the answer going to be? No, Andrew, you big stupid. Males can't have babies. Men can have babies. Because we just defined man to include females, dummy. Well, Matt, I remain unconvinced. I'd like Matt to convince me that if you are a male and you are having sex with another male, which would not be allowed in my version of a secular humanist worldview, how is it that you're not just basically having sex with a guy with a wig on? I really want to know the answer to that question. Not just me, but all rational people who aren't lunatics also want to know why it's ma'am isn't a complete and total crock of garbage. Because I remain unconvinced that it isn't a total lie, and that these people don't just pervert the language to include their own perversions and then...
Now, Matt, do you see Matt right now picking up his phone? As soon as Andrew's done speaking, Matt says, hey, I just text you to the moderator. What he texted him was, I'm leaving. So right now, Matt has decided he's done. He's leaving the debate. Already. So anything you hear from this point forward, Matt's already decided he's leaving.
Add human flourishing at the end. Matt has said he wouldn't make a law stopping 9-year-olds from having sex with each other. Not kidding. Now, I know this is going to sound a little bit totalitarian, but I would in fact create laws that made it a crime for a 9-year-old to have sex with their 9-year-old. I would hold the parents criminally liable for allowing this to happen in my evil authoritarian society, where I don't even let 9-year-olds have sex where the parents go.
Now, this is going to be a big point of contention, and I'm not going to stay here all night. Suffice it to say, based on Andrew's statement here and then interactions with the audience is going to accuse Andrew of lying, right? And I was able to deduce without watching the video, but I have since tracked down the video and saw the clip. And Andrew is 100% right. That is what Matt Dillahunty said. Dillahunty is debating someone who's arguing for Islam, and that person says, yes or no, would you make a law saying 9-year-olds can't have sex with each other? And Dillahunty says, no. And then the Islamic guy says, so you support 9-year-olds having sex. And Dillahunty says, how dare you? I didn't say that. And he's right, he didn't. Let me use the easiest example I know. You could say, I am someone who would never have an abortion, and I would never want my partner or my daughters or my wife or whoever to have an abortion. I would do anything in my power to make sure they didn't have an abortion. However, I don't think we should have a law making abortions illegal. That's what Dillahunty's saying. He's saying, I wouldn't pass a law saying that it's illegal for a 9-year-old to consent to sex with another 9-year-old. However, if it was my 9-year-old, I wouldn't want them to do that. Now, the audience gets all pissed, and they're like, you said that, how dare you misrepresent Matt? He never said he wanted 9-year-olds to have sex. That's not what Andrew said. And the distinction's important because Andrew's whole worldview is, or the argument of these worldviews is, do you see how a secular humanist, in their opening statement that said, we don't have a list of do's and do nots, do you see how fucking crazy it gets then? Objective statements like, yeah, it should be illegal for 9-year-olds to have sex. And if parents are allowing this to happen, they should be arrested. A position I agree with. But under Dillahunty's worldview, you can't do that. But the audience says, that's not what he said, that's not what he said, that's not what he... Yes, it is what he said. Anyways, let's continue.
Go straight to jail for negligence. Now, I think that's better for human flourishing. I think maybe parents would be far less likely to let their 9-year-olds do that if they went to jail. Stupid me. Next, I would in my authoritarian society decree that all simulated sex acts in public were criminal offenses and would make sure that all people went to prison for the crime of indecency, which doesn't assist with human flourishing, and I'd like to know why I'm wrong. Secular humanism can basically be whatever the hell you want it to be. It doesn't really need the principle of freedom or the starting axiom of freedom and peace in order to postulate whatever it wants. It's sloganeering. They're slogans.
Okay, I do want to correct something I said. Maybe this is the text getting sent here. I was unaware. The first time I watched this, it was listening more than watching. I was unaware that he picks up his phone and texts again. So it was either that prior time or it's here that he texts and says, I'm done with this debate.
They don't mean anything. Okay, why do 9-year-olds need to be able to have sex in order to advance humanity? Why do we need to lie about a person's sex in order to advance humanity? Why are these things necessary for human flourishing? Why are decency laws bad? Why would Christian ethics stop flourishing when the theist mandate is to reproduce and the secular mandate is let's just all have sex and have fun, bro? That sounds way worse for human flourishing. In fact, I would say not reproducing is a worst possible thing for human flourishing because if there's no humans, how do you flourish? So, I guess, in essence, step 1, I remain unconvinced. Step 2, I need to be convinced so I'm no longer unconvinced. And step 3, but God not real though doesn't matter here. I've already granted it to still demonstrate just how stupid this ideology actually is. With that, I'll yield my time, and I'm happy to get into it.
Hey, James, I just sent you a message.
All right. We are going to kick it into an open discussion, so 50 minutes, and let's kick it.
No, I don't think so. I'm not going to sit here and dignify the preparation that I went through and what people were here for.
You're so indignant.
Keep interrupting me.
I am.
Okay.
You're so indignant.
Would the moderator like to step in so that I can finish what I'm saying?
Please, Matt. Please. How dare someone have an opposing worldview?
I'm not going to sit here and dignify what was supposed to be a debate about Christianity versus secular humanism, which one's better for the world.
Yes.
With someone who clearly showed up with an agenda that has nothing to do with that.
That's absolute garbage. Even if you agree with Matt's position, how is it what Andrew said not on topic? Dillahunty spent a third of his opening saying, this is what Mike Johnson believes as a Christian. It should be about human flourishing. That's how we decide things. Andrew says, okay, even if you're right that my God doesn't exist, the Christian set of ethics is preferable because here's things that the secular view leads to that I think are immoral or, in your words, bad for human flourishing. How is this not the heart of the topic? It is a complete cop-out to be like, I'm not going to debate. What did he think the debate would be? He says, I think we should have policies that are best for human flourishing. Here's terrible shit that Christians like Mike Johnson believes. And Andrew says, okay, I agree, it should be about human flourishing. Here's terrible shit secularists believes. And Matt Dillahunty says, no, you can't say that. You can't talk about the bad things that secular humanists believe. You can't do that. So what's Andrew's ground here? What's Andrew allowed to discuss? What was this debate hypothetically supposed to be about? Just saying, I think God exists? That was it? That's all that Matt Dillahunty was prepared to debate? Dillahunty understands that he can't defend his position. Now remember when he said, remember this line, when Dillahunty said, the way we resolve conflict, secular humanists, is through debate and discussion. And what does he do? He leaves. Instead, he does the old tired lefty trope. I'm morally superior. My beliefs are morally... It's like a religion. It's a cult. It's right because I say it's right, and I don't have to debate it. And I'm offended that you would even bring it up. How is that not exactly what he is criticizing about Christianity? He says, I believe a worldview where we use debate and reason and discussion to hash out these differences. And then in real time, performatively, he says, I'm not going to debate or discuss these issues. How can anyone defend this? And the truth is, when you claim, and I made this on the Spaces argument, I made this claim. Well, I'll say this, right? Like, if Andrew said, my worldview is Christianity, Eastern Orthodox, that's my worldview, right? And then they start talking, and Dillahunty says, what do you think about gay marriage? And Andrew says, actually, I completely support gay marriage. And Dillahunty says, and you're an Eastern Orthodox, that's where you get your ethical principles. Yep. And then Dillahunty says, well, here's the official Eastern Orthodox stance on gay marriage, and they're against it. How do you respond to that? Wouldn't that make Andrew look stupid? Wouldn't that be completely within bounds of the debate? Of course. And then it's like, okay, there's a contradiction from what you're claiming, Andrew, that you have adhered to this worldview, that your moral principles come from Eastern Orthodoxy, but as soon as it's convenient for you, you eschew them. And by the way, atheists and agnostics and secularists do this all the time. They'll say, the Bible says this, why aren't you doing that? And yet, when he says, my worldview is centered around reason and science, and if there are arguments or disagreements, we settle them with debate and discussion. And Andrew says, okay, here's something secularists believe that is anti-science. Here's something that's anti-human flourishing in Andrew's beliefs. You might say, I disagree, it's scientific. Okay, then make those arguments. But that's not what Dillahunty does. He goes against his principles that he outlined as a secular humanist of resolving disputes with discussion and debate and says, I'm leaving. So then what is, if he's a representative of secular humanism, okay, now how do they resolve disputes? Is there anyone out there that thinks that there is not a credible debate in the trans issues? Whether or not trans men could have periods, whether or not a biological man could be a woman. These are reasonable debates. And Dillahunty says, no. Apparently this is all settled. We're not debating this. So then what is secular humanism? If there's a dispute, then how do we resolve it? Let's just say that the next debate's abortion, right? And Andrew's like, okay, here's why I think abortion's bad. And Dillahunty says, that's evil, that's misogynistic. I refuse to have this discussion. Clearly abortion's good. Now what? That's the secular humanist worldview? How is that any different than a religious worldview? You see, he just says it's right or it's wrong because I said so. At least the Christian says it's right or it's wrong because the Bible says so. Because my religion says so. But Dillahunty's worldview apparently is, if I say it, it's true, and if I don't want to talk about it and I think you're immoral for bringing it up, fuck off.
Someone who refers to trans people as deranged lunatics who will self-terminate if you dare.
Right? It was okay for him to refer to Christians and heinous shit they believe and stupid shit they believe?
Question them?
How am I wrong, Matt?
Someone who misrepresents a quote from a debate where I said I wouldn't make a law about 9-year-olds having sex being legal with respect to the 9-year-olds, not that I was in any way in favor of it, and that I was actually opposed to it, which I addressed during that debate.
Right. Andrew didn't say that. He said he would be against the law, which he concedes right there that is what he says.
But moreover, this is not remotely an honest interaction on the front of whether or not secular humanism is valuable. Because this, when he presented his position here, has nothing to do with secular humanism. From the get-go, it's all about me. Matt thinks.
So, Matt's position was, Mike Johnson thinks. This previous government thinks. So, if he could highlight specific people, why is it more in grounds to highlight someone who's not in the debate, Mike Johnson, than your opponent?
given what Matt thinks,
Matt's position. It's Matt's position.
I came in with the Secular Humanist Manifesto. I came in with positions that aren't that aren't merely my positions.
Oh, well, as long as multiple people hold the position,
this guy's not serious, and I'm leaving. James, if you want a refund, you
well, good day, sir. And I'll cover your refund, Mr. Matt.
He just said he'd cover my refund.
I would cover his refund.
No.
Nope.
I love Andrew. I wouldn't have offered to cover the refund, but Andrew's, well, good day, sir, is great. Absolute right way. Fuck this pearl-clutching nonsense. At this point, I think Andrew should have... They open it up for questions, right? We'll go with the last comments here as Dillahunty leaves. But if I was Andrew, I'd have been like, allow me to speak for a few minutes. And I would have just ripped this dude apart for these contradictions. I believe cover his refund means that probably, and I'd have to talk to Andrew, my guess is that both Matt and Andrew got a speaking fee. And so Matt probably said, James, if you want a refund for what you paid, like let's say they each got $50, and Matt's saying, if you want your $50 back because I'm not doing the debate, I'll give it to you. And Andrew says, I'll cover it. I'll give you the $50 back. That's what my guess is.
No, I'm not going to dignify a debate with someone who walked in to trash talk people and be smug and all of the things that he's being right now. He's already said he will cover my expenses. You don't have anything to worry about. This debate is over. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Jackass.
Did you call?
Oh, so people were saying Matt got $1,500, Andrew got nothing. Funny.
Oh, did you call me a jackass, Matt? Well, you and your husband have a good day, man.
Now, if there was one thing that Andrew said that you could say was over the line, it could potentially be that. But my feeling is once the insults start and he calls him a jackass, well, then that's the game. And it's not like he said, your husband, I saw your husband and he's ugly or this, that, right? Look at that face there from Andrew. That, I mean, perfect. So yeah, that was it. I mean, the big takeaway for me is, what a fucking baby. You make these commitments to participate in this, especially if you got paid $1,500, and you're going to throw a fucking tantrum because someone articulates what your secularist humanist worldview led you to believe, that you claim to be scientific, but he's questioning whether or not the positions you hold are based in science and reasoning, that you claim to be for human flourishing, and he's saying, I directly think the policies that you advocate for are diminishing human flourishing. Thanks, Dex. I appreciate the sub. John says, I'm just realizing all Matt's prep was on a different prompt. Andrew got his debate after another opponent backed out. Matt is arguing secular humanism better than Christianity. Andrew argues ethical foundations. Even if that was the case, which you could see what was basically which foundations were better, Christianity or secular humanism, that's what the debate was titled. How is Andrew's wording, even if you're right about what Matt thought the topic was, how does his arguments not still apply? If secular humanism is better than Christianity, we have to, what does better mean, right? That's the thrust of the debate. How do we determine what is good, what is better, right? He says secular humanists determine that by what's best for human flourishing, right? That's his argument. And the way we come to that is through science and reason and debate and discussion. Andrew says, because theoretically Andrew could say, no, what's best is what's best in a Christian worldview. So to get you into the kingdom of heaven. Andrew says, I don't need to do that. I'll concede that God's not real for the sake of this debate. Concede. So I'm using your framework for deciding what is a better worldview. And that is what leads to the most human flourishing. And the way we determine the amount of human flourishing is through science and reason and discussion and debate. And Andrew says, here's why your secular humanist worldview actually diminishes human flourishing. Here's specific examples. This is why we should not have secular humanism, because we can see that even if this is the determining factor, that we're just using it, human flourishing, using science and reason, the beliefs you have are actually failing in that regard. Now, You can watch the rest of that, and I'll put the link up if you want. What you see for the rest of it is basically a bunch of audience people and James from Modern Day Debates pearl clutching. My guess is, as I don't know, I guess Matt Dillahunty's a bigger speaker, so James probably likes the audience that Matt draws in, so he feels obligated to defend Matt. That's bullshit. Matt's a bitch. He left like a bitch. That's it. If I was moderating, I'd be like, you're going to go? That's what you're going to do. You're just going to leave. Okay. Feel free to leave. Fine. We'll talk about the money I gave you. Andrew, since your opponent left, you have the floor. Would you like to go ahead and comment more? And kind of talk about your worldview and problems with his worldview? Then we'll open it up to audience questions. I would not have excoriated Andrew, and I would not have defended Matt there. I understand that James probably thinks he has his financial and career incentive to stick up for this guy, who Matt then later said, I'm not doing Modern Day Debates anymore anyways. The last thing I'll say real quick, maybe I will see if BPF will let me on, or I'll go watch some of his show. The last thing I'll say real quick is, I find it hilarious that the trans issue specifically seems to be the exact type of thing that Dillahunty was complaining about Christianity. Remember when Dillahunty said, you could be a Christian, you just can't force other people? Well, as a Christian, I would say the same thing about trans people. You could be trans. You could look in the mirror. You could be a biological male who's 70 years old and look in the mirror and say, I'm a 10-year-old little girl. You could do that. But you don't get to force the rest of us to believe that. You see? Do you see the inherent contradiction in why this trans issue is an important issue? Because it shows that the entire worldview that Dillahunty has is contradictory. He picks and chooses, as do so many secular humanists, which is inevitable when you find out that they don't have a list of do's and do-nots. They just have their vague understanding of what I think is best. But without a philosophical underpinning of what you think is best, right? Think of it this way. I think of things in the political lens. That's just how I think. I have a huge problem with the double standard of the application of law at places like the FBI and places like that, right? So way back in 2017 when we got the Steele dossier and the FISA warrants against Trump, etc., I was arguing with people online on message boards and things like that. And I was like, this is a really big scandal if they're using paid opposition research that's unverified to spy on the President of the United States. And I had people tell me, no, because it's such an important issue. And I said, what's the standard? Why is it such important? Well, the accusation, the stakes are so high. All these people, if Trump's a foreign spy, we need to know if the president's a foreign spy. And I said, okay, what's the standard for when we could get FISA warrants because it's such a big issue? What about this situation? And this is what this one guy told me. He said, when there are so many shady connections from a presidency or an administration to a hostile foreign country or a campaign. I said, that's it. So if we have a campaign that has a bunch of hostile connections or connections to a hostile foreign country, then we have these investigations. Yes. I said, okay, let's look at Hillary Clinton. Let's look at her husband personally met with Vladimir Putin and then 2 weeks later spoke at a Russian-owned bank and got paid $500,000 as a speaking fee. They talked with Igor Dushenko, a suspected Russian spy, to concoct this whole story. I did one of these debates with a TikToker. Same shit. I was like, okay, if that's the standard. Thank you, Aftershock. Thank you for the sub. I really appreciate it, man. Thanks so much. The problem is, if you don't have them lay out the standard first, they will always say, this specific incident, because no two situations are ever 100% completely analogous. So if you don't get them to say, what is your fucking standard for what's acceptable, what's illegal, and what's not? That's how they'll twist themselves. They'll say, you see, January 6 people obstructed an official proceeding. That's a felony. Sorry, man. Gotta lock them up. Okay, Jamaal Bowman obstructed an official proceeding. Well, that's different. The specifics are slightly different. That's why you need to get them out. Okay, explain exactly what you mean. It's the same here. If you allow people, if you don't have if your code of morality is, well, whatever I think in the moment, you are not, it is very difficult to be disciplined enough to not bend that code of morality to get whatever the fuck you want at all points. Did you ever hear someone, ever have a friend that cheated on their boyfriend or girlfriend? And it's amazing how many times they'll be able to make themselves the victim. Well, I just wasn't getting the attention. In that moment, they justified that it was legitimate. What they were doing was legitimate. That's the entire worldview that Dillahunty seems to be representing. Well, we don't have a list of do's and do nots. And we solve things through debate and discussion, and we use science and rational thinking to come to conclusions. And also that man can have a period. And I refuse to allow you to point out that that's anti-scientific. I'll just walk away. I refuse to debate or discuss it. So, all right. I'm going to switch over and see what BPF's saying. I got some paperwork to do here, but maybe I'll call into his show. I will not be streaming tomorrow. Thursday or Friday, I'll probably tune in around 11 a.m. I'll probably be doing the spaces with John Burke that we've been doing, though I might have to take off because of a work situation. I'm going to be at work an awful lot here coming up in the future, so it'll be sparing when you catch me. I'll still be trying to stream at least 3-4 live shows a week, so you'll either find me on those Thursday, Fridays around 11 a.m., or you'll find me around this 8 p.m., 9 p.m., all times Eastern, so that's where you'll usually find me. Thank you all so much. Again, sorry if you're just tuning in. What happened was we lost a worker here at work. They didn't die or anything. They just moved on. And so because it's a home healthcare position, that means that I end up working insane hours. I'm not going to bother to rate anyone. Go over to BPF's show, The Crucible. Go to The Crucible. So, all right, thanks. I would rate someone, but my computer's screwing up. That it won't let me switch off screens while I'm on OBS for some reason. My cursor keeps disappearing. So, all right, thanks so much. I'll be going over to BPF's channel. Hopefully, you'll see you over there. I will see you all probably Thursday at 11 a.m. with that Twitter Spaces. You'll be able to find that on all the places you're watching right now. Thanks so much, and as always, have a good one.